Very good evening to our viewers. Thank you for joining us tonight on the evening review. My name is Toivo Njobela, your host. Tonight we are having a guest who is a graduate of medicine from a foreign country as our guest, but I will go into that subject just in a moment. I think for starters, I just want to read a testimony. As you would know, those of you who have been watching the show lately, there's been men coming to this platform to air their difficulties in either relationships or marriages in which they claim to be suffering at the hands of their partners. And since those testimonies were made on this platform, a lot of men have been contacting me privately to also air their concerns, and there's a particular man who asked me to say that he cannot be on the show because he's, of course, we know there's an element of shame and courage that is required for any man to come to this platform and give their testimonies. But this specific man asked me just to read his testimony on air, and I'll do that shortly before we go to the regular interview. Here is the testimony. Thanks for hosting men who decided to speak out against abuse they suffer from their ladies. Kindly share my story with your audience as we continue to speak out against gender-based violence and educate one another on possible solutions. My wife and I have been married for 8 years now. We have 4 kids, the youngest one being 4 years old. I am being emotionally abused by my wife in the following ways. He talks about over-controlling. He says when it comes to attending events of any nature, it makes his wife angry and she has no time to join her husband at those events. Number 2, he says, my friends and relatives are not welcomed at our house. Whenever they pop up, it results in a commotion. Number 3, she is not available for family time whenever being suggested, nor does she bring any suggestion to the table regarding family time. He also talks about our conversations always lead to arguments and commotion in the house because she does not respect me as her husband. And finally, we have been sleeping in separate rooms for over 4 years now, and conversations concerning quality time, which I suppose is intimate time, makes her angry. That is the testimony. Again, I want to underline and put on record that this is not a platform to now suddenly say that men are suffering more than women. I think statistics are there. Women are more in trouble in terms of emotional abuse or even physical when it comes to relationships. But this is the emphasis that men have often not come forward to also put their suffering out in public. And since that first interview that we did with Kanaboy last week, a lot of men have been blowing up my phone, my inboxes, saying, I have a similar story and I would like to share it. So I thought I should put that out there for this particular viewer who asked me specifically to make that arrangement. Now, to tonight's show, I am joined by Dr. Willem Namboga. He's a medical graduate from Cuba. We know that Cuba, or Namibian students studying in Cuba have endured a lot of challenges in recent years. Lack of supplies, government has to make to actually charter a plane to go to Cuba to deliver basic things like toiletries. And Dr. Namboga is here to just share with us how the journey was. First and foremost, Mr. Namboga, thank you. Thank you for coming on the platform. But I suppose congratulations on your graduation.
Thank you, Taiwo.
Yes. What did you graduate in? What did you study?
Well, we went to Cuba in 2016 on a government scholarship through the Ministry of Health and Social Services. At the beginning, we were a group of around 250 students, 200 for medicine and 50 for dentistry. So the dentists finished last year, and then this year was our turn, the medical graduates.
Wonderful. So like in your case, is that you'll be a general practitioner, or did you have any specific specialization?
No, for now it's just a general doctor.
Okay. No, congratulations on that. So we know that, like I said in my introduction there, that there's been a lot of challenges. If you can tell us your experience of studying in Cuba.
Well, Cuba is a very interesting country. It's almost like it's a cultural exchange, because there are people from all parts of the world. You find Hispanics, you find Arabs, you find Americans, Africans, Asians. So the experience was quite enriching, despite the difficulties, the obvious difficulties, given the history of Cuba with the sanctions that have been imposed on Cuba for over 60 years by the American government. So, starting 2016, we had to learn the language first and foremost, because the medium of instruction there is Spanish. Everything is in Spanish.
Even classes are delivered.
Even classes are given in Spanish. So
yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah,
okay.
We spent the first 6 months just exclusively learning the language. And then later we continued learning basic sciences, plus the language as well. And then after that, we then went to our first year and until the 6th year.
I see.
Yeah.
How does one learn a language for 6 months and be able to now attend classes in a very complicated and technical area as medicine and still comprehend that? Because I thought to learn a language requires a number of years or something.
Yeah, it does. It does. It's not easy. It's not easy, but you first have to start with the basics. It's like a child who is in kindergarten or grade 1. What is a cup in Spanish? What is a spoon? You have to start there. The greetings. But I think it also helps to talk to the locals. You have to go out. You have to be proactive. Go out into the streets, talk to the local people, and you'll get it. But I mean, it's one thing to learn how to greet people or to say this is water, but to open a book and say it's a biology book, this is an embryo, this is enzymes, these technical words, that must have been a challenge. Not really, because you know science derives from Latin, and most of the scientific words from English to Spanish, they don't really change. It's just the way it's pronounced. But for example, you gave an example of what did you say now? Enzymes. Yeah. For example, enzyme. In Spanish, it's just enzima. So it's just enzima. Yeah. So it doesn't really change. Okay. So it's not that difficult. Okay. Tell us about this situation that we had in 2020 in particular. I think, was it 2020? Yeah, where the country simply ran out, or your group ran out of toiletries, that the government had to arrange 6 million to charter a plane to deliver toiletries to Cuba for you guys. What was that about? Yeah, like I said, since 1962, there has been this trade embargo imposed on Cuba. They cannot trade, they cannot receive goods from outside. So the situation has already been difficult internally in the country. But now in 2020, add the COVID pandemic with the disruption in the global supply. So that just made the situation worse. The prices went through the roof, things were expensive because of the scarcity. So we found ourselves without basic supplies, and Well, we thought, why don't we ask our government to help us? And that year I was fortunate to have been part of the leadership group that time. So we wrote to the executive director and we asked for them to help us.
Which executive director?
Of the Ministry of Health.
Okay.
Yeah. And we asked them to help us, and they responded positively. And we got the goods, I think, in around August, October. Yeah.
Okay. Prior to this consignment arriving in Cuba, can you paint a picture of how things were on the ground in the days leading to the delivery of those things, during the height of the scarcity of those items?
Well, things were tough because it was also a time where we were not really having face-to-face classes. We were kind of doing social distancing, attending classes in small groups to reduce the overcrowding. But in the country now, in terms of basic supplies, you know, your soaps, your toothpaste, all those things were either very hard to find or very expensive. So we were doing with the little that we had, but the students were very distressed. They were anxious, and they just could not wait for the situation to get better.
Yeah. I think our government gets a lot of stick generally for many things, but that was a very humane move on the part of the government. What do you say about that?
Yeah, indeed, it was because to fork out 6 million, like you said, it's not easy, because at home there were also many problems. Beds had to be bought, makeshift hospitals have to be made, but even during that moment they still heeded to our call, and they helped us to bring those goods. Although it took a while, they eventually came through.
Yeah. How did the students deal with issues of preference? Because sometimes people say, oh, I only use this type of soap or this level of toothpaste or whatever. And I suppose in a situation like that, there must have been a lot of compromise on preferences. Was it quality things that got delivered, or just things to say, look, as long as you carry on with your lives there?
No, the goods were actually not bought by the government. Our families had to buy the goods, package them, and then just deliver the bags to the ministry to then ship them to.
I see. No, it was 3 years ago. 3 years ago, I almost forgot. Yeah, it was actually like that.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought the state actually also bought the toiletries.
No.
So they just made arrangements for delivery.
Yeah,
the transportation element. Okay, wonderful. We go for a small break and then return with Dr. Willem Namboga.
Welkom jullie, mijn naam is Brian Munango en ik is jullie aanbieder voor Gooi Kolen. Dit is donderdagse sportstrip nu. Einde van hierdie programma zal ik en hoe om Frans te praten. Je m'appelle? Je bent?
Le Jean.
Je raakt je me kool.
Is dit een onderbroek?
Blijf geschakeld. We zien jullie weer vrijdag volgende week.
Gooi kool!
Gooi kool!
The evening review continues with Dr. Willem Namboga. Now, Willem, give us a picture of Cuba. I think for an ordinary Namibian like myself, when I think of Cuba, well, I've never been to Cuba, and I have this conflicting perceptions of the country. the embargoes, that embargo, that's one of the things. But we are also told that it's a communist country. In practical terms, what does it mean? What do you see on the ground and say, this is truly a communist country?
Well, to give you a picture of Cuba, I think we have to look at the historical background. First, Cuba was colonized by the Spanish, and then after they left, the Americans had an interest in Cuba. They actually wanted to convert Cuba apparently into a small Las Vegas. And then with that, now the young people at that time, they stood up and they said enough is enough with these American interests. And that's how the revolution happened. That was led by Commander Fidel Castro. Now, with the revolution coming to power, they then established this socialist system where many of the businesses and entities that were private were then nationalized for the greater good of everybody, so that all the resources are enjoyed equally amongst the population. So to answer your question about what do I see on the ground, most of the businesses, for example, are government owned, although now we are also seeing a rise in some private businesses, but most of the things are government owned. All the schools are government owned, all the hospitals are government owned, and I think that's how they actually have managed to build the education and the health system that they have, where it's free of charge. You can have open heart surgery without paying a cent, school for free, you go to the hospital for free. So yeah, it's those things that one sees that is very different, for example, from our system that is mixed. It has an element of state involvement, but also private.
Can a Cuban person own a house like, that's my house?
Yes, they do own houses.
Okay. Yeah. But the means of production, land, labor, and capital,
this belong to the state.
Yeah, belongs to the state. Okay. How democratic is that space there? I mean, we know that Fidel Castro has been there for a long time, but since his death, they're already on their third president now. I think his brother Raul took over from Fidel, and then now there's a president who came here even for our Heroes Day. It's already the third president. In terms of the democratic space, the rights of citizens, what can you tell us about that?
No, they do hold elections.
Yeah.
I think even now, recently, there were elections, I think, at provincial level, where people, it's a bottom-up type of approach where you have to be nominated by your section, by the area where you are from. And then that's how you rise, and you can now go and represent either in the provincial assembly or in the national assembly. Yeah. So they do hold regular elections, and I think it was in 2019 where they held a referendum to change the constitution. There are now term limits also, 10 years. So yeah, I would say it's a democratic space, and there is a respect for human rights. I haven't heard of any human rights abuses.
Okay.
In Cuba.
Yeah. Is there economically, how would you classify? Are they a poor country? Are they, where do you put them?
I would say they are like most of the third world countries. The only difference is that demographically, Cuba is like a first world country because of the systems that they have put in place. So although it's a poor country, it's a country that has got a lot of a high human index development or something like that, and also the health. So if you look at the population pyramid, for example, of Cuba, you might say it's for Sweden or Norway or Finland or something like that. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
Okay. Now back to the original topic. So you are back in the country now. What does the future look like for you, especially at a time when not everybody is getting absorbed in the state systems for jobs? We have a lot of, we still have a number of people unemployed in the medical space. What are the prospects for your group?
Well, the process is like this. You arrive, there is a test that needs to be written.
Yes.
And if you are successful, provided now that there is a space, you can then be offered an internship. And from there, you complete your internship, which is 2 years, and then you become a medical officer. But now, like you said, there are many people who don't have jobs. It's funny because our doctor-to-patient ratio is quite very high. The World Health Organization recommends 1 doctor for 1,000 people. Ours, I think, is at around 1,400, somewhere there. So, in as much as we recognize that there's a need to absorb doctors, I don't understand how there can be a situation where there can be unemployed medical professionals.
Mm. Yeah, that's correct. I mean, in fact, if you go to Mr. Ben Nangombe today, he will tell you that they lack capacity, that actually vacancies do exist. It's just that they don't have the resources to now fill those vacancies. Yeah, but we hope that will be good. The standards, perhaps, as we draw towards the conclusion of our conversation, how would you rate the standards of the quality of education that you guys got in Cuba?
It's quite very high, I would say. We went to a school called the Latin American School of Medicine. The acronym in Spanish is ELAM. They say ELAM. This is a school that trains international students, and is recognized by the World Health Organization. It has also been certified by the Medical Board of California, which is one of the most stringent boards. And yeah, I can say the quality is quite very good, because they have also trained us so much to focus on primary health care, which I think for countries like ours is very important, because we don't have the means, the resources to solve complex problems. That's why you see people being sent to South Africa, being referred to South Africa. So to avoid that problem, it's better to detect the problems while it's still early and solve them at primary basic level, because once they complicate, then you will need more specialized people to solve those problems, and that is more costs for the state but also for the patient.
Yeah. How many of you that eventually graduated from that group of 250, especially the 200 maybe from your
side?
Yeah,
200. About 175.
175.
Yeah.
Others are still there, or how does it work?
Yeah, some are still there. Some there were challenges in the way, and they had to return.
Yeah. Okay. Dr. Namboga, thank you for making time. Really, welcome back home. Congratulations on your graduation. Our wish now is for you to pass that board exam, get absorbed in the system, and start providing health care to our people.
Thank you very much for having me. I think we are ready to make a difference.
Wonderful. That's Dr. Willem Namboga. He's a medical graduate who studied in Cuba and is now back home, ready to serve you and me. Thank you for watching.